It's all on your head. It's all on your head. It's all on your head. It's all on your... So, the Japanese Grand Prix just finished. Well, 10 hours ago. I was too tired after watching that bore fest of a race and waking up at 5:30 to watch it. So I decided not to record anything until now because I have some energy. Now, just before the video starts, I just want to give a massive thank you to everyone who's watched my first video and subscribed to it. I did never expect in a million years that my first video on this channel would get that amount of traction, and honestly it's kind of bewildered me. When I started my first YouTube channel, I got 500 and whatever subscribers in like 5 years, and I've managed to do the same thing in 5 days. So yeah, just thank you to everyone. And if you're not subscribed, please make sure to subscribe and like and all that jazz if you love F1 or this video. And yeah, I'll shut up now. To call it a bore fest is an understatement. Well, I'm up. Top 6 didn't change positions once all race, and I'm pretty sure that anyone who did get past anyone in the top 10 got past them again later on, except Hadjar and Hamilton. But yeah, either way, not a lot happened. Now, I find it kind of ironic that the race was so boring that most of the things that were exciting happened off the track. Like, one of the weirdest ones I've even heard is the fact that Carlos Sainz got fined like 20,000 euros for going to the toilet.
Where the bloody hell have you been?
Toilet?
Toilet? What do you mean, toilet?
Now, for the majority of the race, at least on the Sky F1 feed, I don't know if all of the feeds show the same stuff. I'm assuming most of them don't. The biggest thing that happened throughout the race was watching Yuki Tsunoda try to pass Gasly for like half the race, and then Lando Norris supposedly saving his tyres and then trying to chase Max for the whole race, which also never happened. It was literally 2-second gap to Max, and then it would go up to 1.4, 1.3, and then back down to 2. And then Oscar, oh my god, he's come out of nowhere. He was 1.6 seconds down, and now he's got DRS on Lando 0.7. Whoa, and then he'd go right back down to 1.4 again. So that was pretty much the race up until the first pit stops, as of which the most entertaining thing happened, which was, oh wow, McLaren had a better pit stop than Red Bull, and then they let them into the same path, and then when Max pulled out, he just take the same line, and then Lando was on the same line as well, and that line happened to have grass on the side, so, you know, that gave people a bit of a heart attack. But that was literally the main highlight of the race. I mean, it was the only thing I noticed that people on Instagram and Twitter were posting about. Now, it's ironic that the most synonymous thing that you'll think about with this Grand Prix is that Lando Max incident in the pits, because what I'm going to be talking about is to do with the pits, or more so the strategy that McLaren had at this Grand Prix. Now, Jacques Villeneuve said it pretty well, which is the temperature that the track was at today sort of made it so tyres didn't really degrade. And the only reason that you were changing the tyres, for the most part, is because you need to. You can't just do the entire race on one set of tyres, even though that would be really cool to see as a strategy option. Obviously, it's unsafe, but blah, blah, blah. He said that the track temperature was so cool, and the degradation of the tyres, or the degradation of the tyres, was so low that they could have literally gone the entire race on them if they wanted to. Obviously, they get slower and slower as time goes on, so that's another reason to pit and get some new ones. But that made for horrible racing, because if you usually have tires that degrade really fast and other cars don't, this won't affect them at all. And also the fact that a lot of cars could go very deep into the race, and some cars could go very short into the race and pit, and it would not affect, which is why you just didn't see any undercuts or overcuts in today's race, which also explains why the top 6 were just exactly the same as they were when they qualified. This brings it to McLaren, because yes, that was a thing, but it's also the fact that they are pussies when it comes down to strategy calls.
Strategy call.
Now, I think the main reason that they are pussies, and it's a very big call for calling them that, but I believe it with all of my heart, because recently they haven't had any success, right? You know, Red Bull are a team that have had success for years. Pretty much since 2009, they've been winning races every single year. They're an outfit that knows how to be at the front of the grid, right? They know how to win races, how to get podiums. Now, McLaren have obviously in the last few years been getting more used to that happening with the occasional podium for Sainz, Norris, and then that win for Daniel Ricciardo. But they haven't been so far up to the point where they're now used to winning all the time. And the thing is when you're not used to winning all the time, things like second and third can be seen as a positive, which is why I believe that they take strategy calls a lot more safe than teams like Red Bull would, because Red Bull are so used to the calls that they can make to win, and also they're so used to winning, that if they're in a position where they can win, they need to make sure that they make those bold calls and actually win. Also, the fact that their strategy team is probably the best out there, as well as their pit crew being the best out there, sort of helps. Means that they will get it right 90% of the time with one driver, which is Max. Obviously, Yuki wasn't anywhere near them today, so that, doesn't really affect them. And honestly, for the last 3 years, it's basically just been Max.
I called for help twice, and not a fuck you, what do you need, or nothing.
Which kind of means that they can put more into the strategy because they're only focusing on one driver when it comes to the sharp end. They don't really have to deal with the one dude's in second place, one dude's in third place. What are you going to do? Are you going to swap them? Are you going to let them race? What are you going to do with strategy? Who's pitting first and all that? So that part makes sense. The part that doesn't make sense is the fact that they have two drivers against one driver, yet neither of them took a risk to try and overtake them and do something about that one driver that's in front of them. If Yuki was in fourth place and it was Max, Lando, Oscar, Yuki, it would make more sense for McLaren to be a bit more cautious about their strategy calls because they are then in a 2-on-2 situation. But because they're on a 2-on-1 situation, it feels like they would have a lot more room to obviously experiment with what they're going to do with the drivers because they have two of them and not one of them. But also, it's a lot easier to cover off drivers when you have more drivers available to actually do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to undercut somebody, you pit someone first, and if they pit, you can get the other driver to stay out for a long time and then, experiment with that. But with one driver, you do it, you make the call, and that's it, then it's done. If you had Yuki involved in the situation, or even any of the second Red Bull drivers for the past 6 years, then it makes sense. When it comes to McLaren, they are cautious, and I do say it because of the fact that they're not used to winning, and also that their strategy department aren't really at the tail end as of recent. But I do think that it's the fact that they would prioritize constructors, and they would prioritize a podium, a defined podium, definite podium for both of them. Like, they'd rather them both keep second and third than take a slight risk and then one of them loses a position or two. When it comes to things like that, I feel like they want to play the longer game, but when you have drivers that are that close, it's going to be extremely difficult to actually maintain this drivers championship thing, because realistically, right, Lando's first right now and Oscar's third right now. Both of them are still in contention, which technically means that you don't really want to give team orders as of yet. So you don't really want to be in the position where you're telling someone to hold somebody up, you're telling someone to swap. The problem with that is when you have two drivers that are both in that position and then you're against one driver from another team that's in that position, you're going to end up doing, ironically, a McLaren 2007 where two drivers take points off each other because of how good they both are, and in that machinery, how good the car plus the driver plus the team is. You will end up just taking points off each other every other weekend, and then the dude in third place is basically profiting from that because he's not going up against anyone because they're nowhere to be found, which then makes you lose in the long run. The George Russell effect does nothing. Competition just keeps shooting themselves in the foot. What is this business strategy called? So what do they do about that? Do they do what Mercedes did with Rosberg and Hamilton? No, they can't really do that, because when Hamilton and Rosberg were about, yes, they had slight competition, but they were basically against each other for those 3 years that they were teammates. And they also can't do a Schumacher-Barrichello, because Oscar is a good driver and he is still in technical contention to win the championship as of now. By the way, when I said this about Barrichello, I didn't mean it in a bad way. It sounded bad when I said it at the time. I didn't mean Barrichello was a bad driver. Of course he wasn't a bad driver. He was one of the greatest drivers of his generation. I mean, he was going up against Michael Schumacher, who Ferrari prioritized a hell of a lot, and is Michael Schumacher. So of course they were going to make room in second driver. Do you know what I mean? So what do? Do they prioritize one driver now, or do they let them race and then see what happens, and then later on prioritize a driver, at which point that second driver with big quotation marks could have taken a lot of points off the first driver in big quotation marks, and then that ends up being a big L for the team because everyone cares about the drivers. When you think about 2021, you think about Max winning the drivers. You don't remember that Mercedes won the Constructors?
Sorry, I just think I'm too stupid to understand this.
So you could say, oh yeah, Mercedes were champions that year, and most people go, no, Max was champion that year. Well yeah, Mercedes were the Constructors, and they go, well, who the fuck cares? Everyone cares about the drivers, and McLaren seemed to be in a weird state of not wanting to push or pull anything too hard until it breaks. And for something to perform at its optimal level, you have to be able to push and pull and strain, because you know how the saying goes, you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. And McLaren at this point are trying to boil the eggs, but they're not peeling the shell afterwards. So use that as you will. I don't really know what that means either. So what can they do realistically, and what will they do in my opinion? Something shows me that if they take the same strategy that they did last year, they're going to end up doing a McLaren 2007, which once again is really ironic considering it's a very similar situation, except swap out Ferrari driver for Red Bull driver and then bada beam, bada boom. Now that happened last year. There were multiple occasions where the team were just letting them do papaya rules, which even now people aren't really sure what that means.
Y'all gotta get out the way!
They're also not prioritizing Lando, who was ahead at the time, because they were giving Oscar certain priorities because they wanted him to feel included, I guess. They just weren't prioritizing the driver that was leading in the Drivers' Championship, which was Norris. Now, I'm not saying they have to, drop everything and just decide to sacrifice Oscar's everything to appease Lando. They are still trying to win a Constructors' Championship as well. They can't just say, fuck you, Oscar, he is also a part of the team. But if they follow the same strategy they did last year, where they weren't prioritizing one driver just because one other driver happened to be in front at the time, like perfect example was Italy. Oscar went around the outside in Monza, right? And it was a really good move, but they should have said later on, let him past. It's unfair, but you will have a go at it next year because you had a really bad start to the year, and unfortunately, you're behind by a significant amount, and we need every single point we can. So let him through, and then if you manage to do the same thing next year, we'll be on evens at the beginning, and then we'll see what happens. But they didn't, which shows me that they haven't taken what I just said into account, which means they're going to do the exact same thing again this year, which means because Max isn't going up against any of his teammates plural, we might see Hadjar on the fucking seat at this point, he's just going to win because he'll be able to take every point away. Even at a point we thought, like the second race, we were like, oh my god, George Russell is going to win the drivers.
George Russell completes the podium. George Russell got within 1.3 seconds of Norris. He completes the podium.
He's got 2 P3s in a row, and if McLaren drivers keep taking points off each other, George could get the cheeky win, and then he's leading the drivers somehow. What do I think is the actual solution for them doing it? Because that's what I think is going to actually happen. I don't know if it's too late to say the midpoint of the season is where they start prioritizing one driver over the other. I don't know if that's too far into the season, because I imagine that if these two are as close as they are now, it'll be Oscar's taking points off Lando, Lando's taking points off Oscar, and then Max or whoever the hell it is at the time, someone else hopefully comes into the mix as well, takes points off them because they're not having to worry about their teammate as much. But yeah, I feel like that's the most realistic option. I don't know what they've actually discussed with their drivers, because surely they've discussed something and the drivers aren't actually going to say it publicly, because they know that they've got a really good car and they know that they're both against each other anyway, and now it's at the very, very top end, so they probably discussed it with their drivers. But my imagining of what should happen is that they will wait until they get to the middle of the season, and then once they get to the middle of the season, whoever's ahead on points will then be prioritized, and then the other driver will have to adhere to whatever the team says. That's what I want to happen, and as I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to lose the drivers at the end of the year because of this, but that's what I want to happen. And personally, I want Lando to win it because British bias, obviously. Either way, if any of them win, as long as it's someone new, I don't mind. Do you know what I mean? It's not like I don't want Max to win 5 in a row, because he obviously, if he wins it, 5 in a row, he deserves it. It just makes for an interesting title fight, do you know what I mean? And then people in a few years, when they look back, won't do the same thing that they do with Lewis's titles, where they just go, wow, he won 4 in a row, wow, he won 7 in total. Boring, when they weren't, but that's all you see in the future. So, you know, I just hope that McLaren get their ideas and book them the hell up, because right now they are pussies and they need to really stand on business before Max does this every other race. Other than that, I am Frosty, and I still have no outro. I didn't steal this off the War Owl, by the way. I swear to